Hey guys, I'm Hasib Islam, and I'm gonna take a look at the monograph by David Katzenstein, Ritual. So, David Katzenstein was an American photographer, I believe based around in New York. And in his introduction page right here, he actually talks about having most of his career like traveling around the world. Um, he worked for he worked for decades just photographing people, cultures, ceremonies, um, and what makes Katzenstein so important is that he saw photography not just as documentation, but as a way to understand what connects humanity and like humans themselves. So his focus on in this book is, of course, ritual, and that can be religious or cultural or everyday. It shows how people use ceremony to give meaning to their lives. So through his camera, he revealed like both the diversity and the shared emotions of human experience. After reading this book, it's not very long. There's because it's a monograph. It's just mostly his pictures around various countries, both in Asia and Africa. And he tackles, it says right here, uh, a lot of different religions, but also just other everyday rituals. So he'll do like Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, but then also things that you might not expect. And I'll actually be going through some of them and pick out five that I thought were pretty interesting. And not all five were actually religious or religion based either. Um, my overall thoughts, I found it to be moving and very thought provoking, and I actually really like sort of his method and little nuanced things I noticed. For example, like uh, what kind of makes him different from other people who like to photograph like rituals and ceremonies. So I researched, what are other artists or photographers that kind of do the same thing as him, and I found like, for example, one of them is Steve Curry, and I looked at Steve Curry's images, and I might actually put up one of his images for you guys to see as well. But essentially, what he does and what Steve Curry does versus what Katzenstein does, and I'm sure you'll see as like I go through the book, but they they do the same thing, but they do it very differently. So, for example, Katzenstein, all of his photos are black and white, and it's very intentional actually. Like, at first you might think, oh, maybe it's just to look vintage or old timey or some sort of like um, aesthetic purpose, but I think it's more than that, and I'll explain more once we see a couple of the images. But yeah, we'll go through that. Um, but overall, yeah, the black and white images, I think they make you focus on light, texture, expression instead of the color, and it gives every scene a sort of timeless feeling for sure. What I liked most is how Katzenstein approaches his subjects with respect and empathy. So all of the people inside, like all the subjects, um, he definitely carefully captures them with respect, and you can tell that he's sort of invited into the place and allows us as the viewers to feel like we've just stepped in, and sort of been accepted into these areas where rituals are taking place. Um, and he doesn't just take pictures of rituals. It feels like he's inviting us into them, or that he himself is invited into them. So the only thing, I guess the only complaint, if there was a complaint, is that I wish I could go to these areas myself. It'd be cool to travel alongside Katzenstein and experience all these different cultures and religions and see all these like locations myself, but of course, right now we just have the photographs, right? But I mean, that's not really a complaint. It's just it just makes me want to travel, I guess. So yeah, we're gonna move on and talk about the 5 images. But first, I just wanted to show you kind of how the book is formatted. So first of all, it's kind of sectioned off by like the country or location, if that makes sense. Just the area. So right now it's like near India. So a lot of these are going to be Indian ceremonies or rituals. Like this is Sri Lanka, which is India or Asia. Yeah, and then he writes a little bit about his visit to that location and his travel and sort of what he experienced. Yeah, these images are pretty big. You take off a lot of the page, actually. Take up a lot of the page. And this is actually one of the images that we're going to talk about. But, okay, so this image actually is one of the images that we're going to talk about. And it's called Krishna Widows. It is in the India section of this book. And it's taken Vrindavan, Uttar Pradesh in 1995. And I looked a little bit into this, what exactly was the Krishna Widows. So basically, it's a pretty emotional piece. The image shows widows in white saris. That's the clothing they're wearing. And they're gathered in a courtyard surrounded by light, of course. Their faces are calm, but you can sense so many like untold stories behind their expressions. Like, you don't know. Oh, well, obviously, like you can tell that a lot of them are sort of aged, but we don't know, all of their lives or life stories. And knowing that Vrindavan is a city where many widows live for spiritual reasons, it makes the photo more meaningful. It's not just a scene of worship, it's a scene of endurance and faith. I love how Katzenstein captures them with dignity and compassion. The photo makes you think about how rituals give strength to people who have been set apart from society. So even, we don't know their lives, but the fact that they all kind of come together and are all sort of widows in solidarity. It gives them meaning and gives them purpose. Those is basically the whole idea is a widow who is sort of impoverished and seeking refuge. And so they go to this city, Vrindavan, and they worship Krishna, the Hindu god, and he's sort of like, he gives them peace, he gives them a sense of community and belonging, and yeah, that's basically what these women are doing here. It's like a place of worship, but also community, and yeah. All right, we're gonna move on to the next image. And actually, it's gonna be in a different section. So as you can see, these are youth scouts settled here, and it's not really like you wouldn't really think of this as, ritual or it's not. There's no religion tied to it. There may be like beliefs tied to it, and other things, but it's more so, I feel like a lot of the times it's just sort of like capturing people and gathering and also tying in tradition, if that makes sense. I think his definition of ritual is very broad. It's something you wouldn't really expect. There's more youth scouts. All right, and then the next section is actually, we're gonna look at Toba in Senegal. So I wanted to look at this one, train station, Toba, Senegal, 2004. And I thought this was really interesting because at first, to me, it just seems like, an ordinary travel scene. It's, a little hectic, a little bit blurry, actually, in a lot of the areas, where people are moving, sort of like a busy street or, travel space. But then you think about it a little bit more and you realize that the act of travel is kind of its own ritual. The people are waiting, moving, preparing to go somewhere important. The light seems like possibly early morning. It's sort of soft lighting. It gives a whole image, the sense of like waiting or anticipation. And to me, it represents transitions, the moment in between places that are just as meaningful as the destinations. So I think Katzenstein is showing that ritual can happen in motion. It doesn't have to be, in a still, quiet temple. It can even be, in transit, essentially. And here's more of that train station photos. Senegal photos. And then the next one we're gonna look at. Great. The next one we're going to take a closer look at is this one, the Sacred Baobab Tree, Toba, Senegal, 2004, the same year as the train station. And as you can see, a group of people are gathering around a tree, but it's taken from sort of like a husk or a hole in the tree, or through the tree. And you can see the rough texture of the bark, and it's catching light, and everything feels peaceful. I love how the photo is suggesting that nature itself is actually sacred. There's no temple or altar here, for worship, but the gathering of these people feels like an act of prayer to this tree, and it makes me, think about the fact that ritual doesn't need a building or a formal ceremony. It can happen, wherever people find a meaning. It can happen with nature. Thought it was cool. So now a couple pages over, once we passed this section and head to, I believe, here it is, the Jerusalem and New York section. We're going to talk about right, so here's another image I wanted to focus on. It is Military Assembly, Cusco, Peru, 1984. As you can see, I'm going to take a closer look. And I wanted to show this one as it shows rows of soldiers standing in formation in a public square. At first it looks perfectly uniform, but if you focus, you can actually see some individual faces over there. And it, some of them are proud, some of them are tired, some uncertain. I think Katzenstein is showing how even something as formal as a military parade is kind of a ritual. It's creating unity, order, and belonging, but it also represents authority and control. The symmetry of composition is powerful, but what keeps me looking at it is the humanity inside the pattern. Like the composition, it keeps going. The soldiers, go on and on. But the fact that you can see, the individual expressions it's what sort of connects us to them. It makes us realize that, you know, these are someone's children, and essentially it's connecting, you know, these soldiers to the rest of humanity. Like, these are humans, these aren't just soldiers. So this is the last of the 5 that I chose, the Western Wall, and essentially it's showing worshippers standing closely to the ancient stones, touching them and praying. You can almost feel the texture of the wall and the weight of history in the photograph. The people look small next to the huge blocks. You can see it's just one block, almost the size of, you know, the person in the middle. But their presence fills the space with emotion. I think the image ties the whole book together. It shows how ritual connects the past and present, the individual, the community, and even sort of the, you know, the almost inanimate, or, you know, the environment itself to, you know, to human connection, essentially. You can sense both, you know, universality and, you know, sort of close-up intimacy in one frame. So to wrap up, what I took away from the book in general is that the photography can be more than just observation. It can be participation. Katzenstein is not just, you know, showcasing what rituals look like, but he's kind of helping us feel why they matter and sort of inviting us into the ritual space. Each photograph is reminding us that human beings everywhere are creating moments of meaning, whether it's through prayer, travel, you know, ceremony, simple acts of gathering. It's all kind of the same in a way. How to describe that is pretty much, you know, the intentionality behind his decision to make these photos black and white is, of course, it, you know, it shows, you know, high contrast where he wants, you know, the light in the image to be, you know, what his focus is in the images. But I also think it's sort of connecting all of these locations and all of these rituals into this one underlying argument he's trying to make about humanity itself. So I think he's trying to connect, you know, for example, Brooklyn, New York, and like this ritual space to, you know, every other ritual space that we're seeing, like Cairo, Egypt. You know, he's sort of like creating this sameness in his images, and showcasing to us that all of these are rituals, all of these are ceremonies, and a gathering of people, and a creation of moments that are meaningful. And so he's sort of, you know, hinting at that we're all one and the same, essentially. Even through all of our differences, we're all connected as being humans. And I think that's a really cool, you know, takeaway. I think that's a very interesting way of looking at these rituals, because, you know, on one hand, he's traveling in so many places and he's showcasing so many different, you know, religions, so many beliefs, so many ceremonies, so many locations, but he's at the end of the day, he's connecting everything together. But yeah, that's what Katzenstein, I believe, is doing. And I'm gonna go ahead and probably put up an image of a photo that a photographer around Katzenstein's time was also doing these type of portraits, you know, photographing ritual or community or faith practices. And one of them is Steve McCurry, but you're going to be able to see that, you know, for example, in his Afghan Girl, the difference in Katzenstein and McCurry's photos is essentially that McCurry is photographing, you know, his approach is emphasizing color and drama and single individual within the larger cultural spectacle. Like he's focusing on, you know, the Afghan girl in this image, and he's sort of emphasizing that person's individual culture. Whereas Katzenstein, you know, a lot of his images, you know, maybe there's a lot of faces that are blurry. He's not particularly concentrated on one, you know, person or thing. It's more so just like the gathering of the people and the places that they go, and, you know, the atmosphere of the area, you know, whether it's, you know, festive or serene, or, you know, the calmness of the space. That's what he's trying to capture, and of course he's doing it so in black and white, and I think that's the main difference for his images and other people that are also the other photographers that are also drawn to ritual and community. You know, another one I found is Joseph Kudelka. He has a series on gypsies and exiles, and he sort of, you know, captures marginalized groups. But a lot of what he focuses on is movement and displacement, and, you know, wanting to belong somewhere. He's very focused on that. And here's an image of Joseph Kudelka's in his Gypsy and Exiles series. So yeah, that was Joseph. And once again, I think, you know, the difference is for Katzenstein, you know, he wants to emphasize the emotional neutrality and the empathy in his framing, the balance between sacred, you know, and secular, and he wants to sort of showcase a global, like, consistent visual language, like, no matter where, you know, where the photo is. This is in Guatemala. His role here is an observer, and he's showcasing, you know, stepping back and just letting the ritual speak for itself, essentially. His captioning tends to be minimal, like it's sort of just, you know, place, year, and even his writing isn't all that descriptive of the photos themselves. He writes, you know, about his travel experience. Yeah, he just kind of takes you in these moments around the world.